So today we're going to cover Chapter 4, Section 4. Today what we're going to do is just cover completing the square. So we're going to be changing the given equations into the standard form of either the parabola, the ellipse, or the hyperbola. Now the next slide has all the step-by-step instructions. So instead of reading through all these, I'm just going to go right into the example and walk you through nice and slow. So let's take a look at our first example. The first thing we want to do is look to see how many square terms I have in the given equation. And notice I've only got a y squared. My x variable is not squared. So this is a clue that this is going to be the equation of a parabola when there's only one squared term. So what I'm going to do is I want to move my constant and the variable that doesn't have a square term match. So you see how the x, there is no x squared. So I'm going to leave it over there. I'm also going to move the constant over there with it. So I'm subtracting 3 from both sides. I'm going to go ahead and write down my y variables. I'm going to leave a blank space and then write the x minus 3. So now I need to complete the square for my y variable. I take this b term, divide it by 2, and square it. I get negative 3 squared, which gives me 9. I'm going to now take that 9, and technically what I'm doing here is adding 9 here and 9 here. But if you remember, when I taught you completing the square, instead of putting it in as a plus 9 here, what I put it in as is what it was before I squared it. Because then that makes factoring this side so much easier because this goes right into my binomial. This will factor into whatever's right here, y minus 3 squared. And then I have to do the math over here, and I need to do negative 3 plus 9, and I get x plus 6. And now I've got it in standard form. Notice on this one, I've got 2 squared terms. I've got an x squared and a 4y squared. Notice they're both positive, x squared and a positive 4y squared. When both of the square terms are positive, this is a clue that my graph or my equation that I'm going to form is going to be an ellipse. If one was positive and one was negative, then it would be the hyperbola. So I'm going to go ahead and I need to get my 2 y's terms together and my 2 x terms together. And I'm going to leave the blank space. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my 2 x's together. And then I'm going to put my 2 y's side by side. And I also have to move the constant to the other side. Now, when I'm rearranging the x and the y terms, I'm not moving them across the equal sign. So I pull the same signs that they've got. So x squared plus 6x, leave the little blank space. Then I'm going to set up my y terms. So it's a positive 4y squared minus 8y, leave the blank space, and then I move the constant to the right side. I now need to do 2 separate completing the square problems. So I'm going to work on the red one. And again, remember when you complete the square, the number in front of the square term must be a 1. So the red is already good. So I'm just going to take my b term, this positive 6, divide it by 2, and square it. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then 3 squared is 9. So remember, I'm going to put the plus 3 squared in here, but over here on the right side, I'm going to put plus 9. All right, thank you. This should be a minus 9. So this is a negative 9. Good catch. Thank you. So for the blue, let's go ahead and finish the red first. So let me finish completing the square for the red. So then this turns into, the red turns into x plus 3 squared. Now let's do the blue. Now remember, the coefficient or the number in front of that y squared needs to be a 1. So I need to divide both of these by 4. So once I divide this by 4, I get y squared minus 2y, and then leave the blank space. I still need to keep working on doing that. I could go ahead and do -9 plus 9 and put a 0 here. If you'd rather just do everything all at once, you can. So now I need to complete the square of the blue. I take the b term, that -2, divide it by 2, and square it. So this gives me -1. -1 squared is 1. Now remember, in here I'm going to put the -1 squared. Now over here, I need to fill in here. Whenever you factor out a GCF, you have to multiply what you would be adding to the other side. So this is actually going to be adding a 4 here. So now I have the red. It stayed the same. I already factored it. And then the blue, the GCF, and then this factors into y minus 1 squared. Equals 0 plus 4 is 4. Remember, the standard form, it needs to equal 1. So now I need to divide everything by 4 to make this answer over here become a 1. So now my final answer in standard form is going to be x plus 3 squared over 4 plus, notice here, these 4's simplify, and this becomes a 1 and a 1. So I'm just going to leave it as y minus 1 squared. I don't need to put the 1 in the denominator. And then now it equals 1. And now it's in standard form. This is the graph of an ellipse. It's got the plus sign in the equation. And then notice when it's asking about the translations, remember anything here that's added or subtracted to the x, this is going to be the horizontal shift. And it's backwards of what you think. So really it's going to be a shift 3 units to the left or horizontally. And then for the y, this would be 1 unit up, backwards of what you think. So when you go to pick the shifts at the bottom, it'll have descriptions. And you're just looking to see what's added or subtracted to the x and the y. And then that'll tell you how it shifted backwards of what it looks like. All right, so for the next one, if you notice, the x squared is positive, but that y squared is negative. So when you have one positive, one negative, this is going to turn in to the equation of a hyperbola. So again, we need to get our x's together side by side and our y's and move the constant to the other side. So I'm going to subtract the 16 from both sides. And then I'm going to put my two x terms together. And then there's only a y squared. So let's go ahead and rearrange it. So 4x squared plus 8x, leave a blank space, then put in the y, and then the negative 16. So I need to complete the square for the red first. I need to factor out that 4. Number in front of x squared needs to be a 1. So divide it. Leave the blank space. Over here, notice there's no b term, but I could factor the negative 3. And then I could show that it's going to be y minus 0. I could go right to its factored form. And then equals the negative 16. So now I need for the red, take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it, and I get 1. So then I'm going to be adding plus 1 squared here, But remember, the GCF times what you would have been adding, so it's plus 4. So now let me factor the red. So 4 times x plus 1 squared. And then I could drop, I'll just leave this like this for now. I can drop the minus 0. And then over here, negative 16 plus 4, negative 12. I don't want it to be equaling a number, so I have to divide everything by negative 12. Now, just on a side note, let me tell you about this because I'm going to be switching something in a minute. Remember, when you have a fraction, if there's a negative in the numerator or a negative in the denominator, it just means the whole fraction is negative. And that's what's going to happen here with my first fraction. I'm going to simplify this. I can simplify the 4 and the 12, and then this denominator is going to become a negative 3. So x plus 1 squared over negative 3, and then the blue one, negative divided by a negative, and this is going to turn into a positive 4 down here in the denominator. So then now we have y squared, because the minus 0 I could drop, over 4 equals 1. Now, this is where I wanted to show you this, because this denominator here, I can move the negative sign now to the front of the fraction, and then now I'm going to flip-flop these two. And I'm going to put the positive fraction first, and then the negative fraction turns into the subtraction sign, making this the equation of the hyperbola. So this one only has a horizontal shift 1 unit to the left because of the plus 1 with the x. So whatever is being added or subtracted to the x, that's the shift left and right or horizontally. And it's backwards of what you think. So it would look like it's moving to the right 1 unit, but it's really left 1 unit. All right, next one. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I want my square term to be positive. So I'm going to divide everything by negative 1. Oops. So negative 1, divide it all out. So then this becomes positive x squared, negative 10x, negative y, positive 21 equals 0. So remember, for the parabola, we need to take the term that doesn't have a square and move it to the other side with the constant. So here I actually have to move the y to the other side and the 21. If you want to do it in 2 steps, you can. I'm just going to do it all at once. And then now I've got my square term that I'm going to complete the square for, and then the y minus 21. I'm going to take this b term, and I'm going to divide it by 2. So negative 10 divided by 2 and square it. So negative 5 squared gives me positive 25. So that's what I'm going to add over here. But remember, in this one, I put the negative 5 squared, because then that goes right into my binomial that is squared. And then the left side, I have to do the math. Negative 21 plus 25, and I get y plus 4. On WebAssign, it's going to ask you for what this is, and this is a parabola because there's only one squared variable, and this would have been a shift 5 units to the right, or 5 units horizontally to the right, and then 4 units down. Okay, so the next one again, we're going to look for our squared variables again. Since the negative 2y squared, I'm going to divide everything by negative 1 right from the beginning. Makes it a lot easier. So divide everything by negative 1. And then I don't need to put the GCF in front. So this becomes positive 2y squared negative x plus 20y plus 49 equals 0. Again, what I want to move to the other side is any variable that doesn't have a corresponding x squared or y squared with it. So I'm going to move both the x and the 49 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract the 49 and add the x to both sides. It'll cancel this and this. And now I have 2y squared plus 20y, leave a blank space, and then now I have the x minus 49. I need to complete the square for the y variable. Again, I can't have a number, a coefficient in front of the square term that's not a 1, so I'm going to divide out a 2. So 2, and then I'm left with y squared plus 20y, leave a blank space, and then I still have this right side. So now I take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it. So the 10 divided by 2 and squared, 5 squared, and I get 25. So now I should be adding 25, but remember we had this 2 that we factored out. So 2 times the 25. So we're going to be adding 50 over here. But in here, remember, I put what it was before it was squared. Because then it goes right into my binomial. It's y plus 5 squared. And then over here, I've got to do this math. Negative 49 plus 50. And I get x is equal to, or x equals x plus 1. Now, we need the y squared isolated. So I need to divide both sides by 2. And remember, when we did these parabolas, we needed the 4p value. So I don't leave it with the 2 in the denominator. What I'm going to do is write this as y plus 5 squared. And then I'm going to take that divide by 2 and write it in as a 1/2. Because remember, when we were doing this whole thing with the parabolas, we needed to take that number that was in front of the non-squared variable and set it equal to 4p to get the distance from the vertex to the focus and the distance from the vertex to the directrix. So that's why we turn it into that fraction versus leave it as divide by 2. What this really is it's y minus k squared equals 4p x minus h. That's what we just set up. So again, I need to get my 2 square terms together, and I'm going to put the positive 1 first, and then I'll put the y because it's got the subtraction sign, and then I'm also going to add the constant to the other side. We're going to take our x squared and our 2x, put it together. So I have x squared minus 2x. I'm going to leave a little blank space. Then I'm going to add the y squared. And then I've moved the constant to the other side. So I'm going to work on the red one first. I take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it. Negative 1 squared gives me positive 1. So in here, I'll put the plus negative 1 squared. Over here, I'm just going to put the plus 1. Now notice on the y, there is no squared term, so nothing to factor here, or nothing to add to the other side. Technically, I'm adding a 0. So then if I factor the red one, this turns into x minus 1 squared. The blue is y minus 0, because there was no b term, and then equals 9. I need to divide everything by 9 to make it equal 1. So my final answer here is going to be x minus 1 squared over 9 minus, and I could drop the minus 0 and just put y squared, and then it equals 1. This is the graph of, or the equation for a hyperbola. And notice this one would have been a shift horizontally 1 unit to the right. Notice I've got a negative 25x squared and a positive y squared. So again, graph of a hyperbola. So I'm going to go ahead and get my y squareds together. So I'll put the positive one first, and then I'll put the x's because that's got the negative 25. And then I'm also going to add this constant to the other side. So I'm going to put the y squared, leave a blank space, negative 25x squared minus 100x, leave a blank space, positive 125.
How do we get more?
No b term on the red here, so we can just leave it for now. I need to divide out a negative 25 here. So negative 25 x squared plus 4x, leave a blank space, equals 125. For the blue, so there's no b term on the red, so I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to do a 0. So for the blue, take the b term, divide it by 2, square it. So what I'm going to be putting in here is plus 2 squared. But remember, for the number on the other side, we need to incorporate that GCF. So negative 25 times 4. And what I'm going to be adding to the other side is a negative 100. So I'll just put minus 100. So now I can go ahead and factor the red. So this is really y minus 0 squared. Negative 25 x plus 2 squared. And then equals 1. Nope, sorry. Equals 25. And now I have to divide everything by 25 to make my equation equal to 1. So the red, I can just put it back as y squared over 25. The blue, the 25s cancel, and that just becomes 1s. So then it's just going to become x plus 2 squared equals 1. And is the graph of a hyperbola. So let's try the next one. Again, I've got an x squared and a y squared. So again, let me go ahead and rearrange it. So I'm going to put these first, and then I'll put this second, and then I'm going to move the constant to the other side. So now I get 25 y squared minus 100y, leave a blank space, negative 9x squared equals 125. Remember, when you complete the square, I can't have a number in front of my squared term. So I need to divide both of these by 25 first. So then now I'm working with y squared minus 4y, leave a blank space, minus 9x squared equals the 125. Next, I need to take that b term of the red, divide it by 2, and square it. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. So then now, I'm going to put in here the negative 2 squared. And then over here, 25 times 4. So I'm going to be adding 100. So I'm going to factor the red, y minus 2 squared. I could factor out the 9 here and put this in as x minus 0 squared, but it's just going to go back to it. And then here, 225. So now I have to divide everything by 225. 25 over 225. This is going to simplify. 25 times 9, or 225 divided by 25 is 9. So this will simplify, and this becomes a 9. This becomes a 1. So this will become y squared, or y minus 2 squared over 9. And then minus, and this simplifies as well. 225 divided by 9 is 25. So this will become a 25. This becomes a 1. And again, the minus 0, just leave it as an x squared over 25 equals 1. The negative 1. Okay, so again, anything that doesn't have a corresponding y or x squared or a y squared, it needs to get moved to the other side. So those two are going to get moved to the other side, and then these two are going to stay on the left side. So I'm going to subtract the x and subtract the 26 from both sides. So then now I'm left with y squared plus 10y, leave a blank space, and then negative x minus 26. So now I need to complete the square for the red. Take the b term, divide it by 2, and square it. So I get 5 squared, and it's 25. So I'm going to be adding 25, but in here I'll put the 5 squared. So then it's nice and easy to factor. Y plus 5 squared, and then negative x minus 1. Now I need that x to be positive, so I'm going to factor out a negative 1. So then this gives me negative 1 and then x plus 1. And that's going to be my 4p value. The 4p value is that negative 1. So you can either leave it as the negative 1, or what's better is just put it in as a negative sign. But technically it's either way. Okay, so on this question, you can have a number here in front of x. It just can't be negative. So that's why we pulled out the negative 1. So for the last one, again, I need to get my square terms together, and I need to get my constant on the other side. So I'm just going to add the 16, and then my constant will be all by himself. So I need to get my square terms, my y's together, and my x's together. So here I'll put 16y squared minus 32y, leave a blank space, move the x over a little, and then set it equal to that constant. So we need to do the blue. Can't have a 16 in front of that y squared, so divide by 16. So 16 y squared minus 2y, leave a blank space. For the 9x, I could go ahead and do the x minus 0 squared because there's no b. And then the 128. For the blue, take the b term, that negative 2, divide it by 2 and square it. So negative 1 squared is positive 1, but remember, we factored a GCF out, so I got to times it. So I'm going to be adding 16 to the other side. So when I factor this, in here I'm going to put the negative 1 squared. So this will be y minus 1 squared. And then over here, negative 9x minus 0 squared. And then I'm going to add the 128 and the 16, 144. So now I can divide everything by 144. And then now I can simplify the 16 and the 144. I know 16 times 9 is 144. So now I have y minus 1 squared over 9 minus, and then the same thing here, the 144 is going to turn into a 16, and that's a 1. So then I can just make this x squared over 16 equals 1. And I am done. So this is the hyperbola.